keeping you up to speed on all your Colorado teams. It's time for Coffee Break.
Happy Tuesday, everybody. It is New Year's Eve. 2025 is less than 24 hours away. And as we ring in the new year, there's a lot of moving and shaking still to happen in the NFL, which is why I bring in my regular Tuesday guest, NFL insider James Palmer, to break it all down with me. James, how are you, man?
I'm wonderful, Richie. Merry New Year. How are you?
Doing well, doing
Good.
well. And I think I'd be doing a little better if the Broncos were not sitting in the semi-precarious position that they've placed themselves in. It doesn't, even though you can still say things like they control their own destiny and, you know, they have their path forward. It's more clearly than the rest of the AFC. Being at 9-5 with 3 to play and then losing 2 in a row doesn't feel great.
No, I'm terrified, honestly. I am. Like, I'm going to cover this game. I want to be there at Mile High and kind of soak it all in person, because this is a young team. This is a young quarterback. This is a group that is trying to ascend and build something together. And essentially now your back's against the wall. And you're playing a team that is going to be as loose as you can probably play an NFL game. Because it's going to be Carson Wentz going out there and just slinging it. And I would say, you know, people can talk about what the last couple of years have been like for Carson Wentz. It's one of the best backups in football. This is a guy who was going to win an MVP in 2017. Mm-hmm. Obviously, a lot's changed since then, but this is a talented player. This is a group that's just going to come in with nothing to lose, and I don't know how the Broncos don't play tight, at least in the beginning portion of this game, because of the position they've put themselves in. It is a wild spot, I think. And I think the Chiefs playing their backups even complicates it further, Richie,
Yep.
in all honesty. Because now you're going with the assumption of going like, oh my God, like I think it adds pressure to win.
Too.
So I think the situation that they have now found themselves in, and I do think we all have to take a step back and remember where we all thought they were going to be at the end of the season, which was going to be around a 5-6 win team. But that perception was out the window a long time ago.
I
agree. This was considered a playoff team well over a month ago with the way that they've been playing. So I do think we need to grade them, not on what we thought was going into the season.
Yes.
We need to grade them on where they've been for most of this season. And I think that makes this even more terrifying.
I am so glad you said that, because I'm seeing comments on social media. I'm hearing it around the airwaves and on TV, and even some of our commenters here on the show are saying, hey, well, don't forget, this is a team that no one had high expectations for. And all that's great. 6 months from now, I can have that kind of perspective. I can look back and say, hey, look at how far they outpaced the first year of a rebuild with a rookie quarterback and all that. But we're not in that right now. Right now, we're sitting on the doorstep of a playoff berth. And yes, this team, while all of that may be true, that they overachieved and have kind of outkicked their coverage in certain aspects, oh, well, that's now the game has changed.
Here's a great comp.
Yeah.
Look, should Vikings fans right now just be satisfied with what went on this year?
Right, exactly. Yeah, they had to go into the season with Sam Darnold for longer than expected. Their quarterback in the wings, J.J.
A quarterback
McCarthy.
that has shown nothing his entire career.
Right, a journeyman, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And now, Vikings fans are supposed to be just happy with where it's at right now. No, that perception is gone when you enter the second half of the season, because we know the parity of the NFL. We know the number of teams that were playoff teams one year and are no longer playoff teams the next, and the number of teams that weren't playoff teams and become playoff teams. So preseason predictions, yes. In the offseason, when you want to rally the troops in April, and Sean Payton's getting these guys together during minicamp going like, look at what we overachieved this season. That's a step to 2025. We want to get this, and this done. Great. Mention it then. You can't talk about it right now. This was a playoff team for some time, and you have to get into the postseason. And I think the way this is shaping up, yes, they control their own destiny. Yes, they just have to win. I think it's a difficult spot that they have really, really put themselves in.
As it sits right now, James, the Broncos are nearly double-digit favorites to win the game, and a lot is being made of the Chiefs are going to rest players and things like that. But I think it's important to note that you can't just play all backups. It just doesn't work that way. There's not enough spots on the game day roster to be able to you're not going to call guys up from a practice squad and move all that. So
this isn't college. There's not 100 guys on your roster.
Exactly. So, and you are as connected to the Kansas City Chiefs as anybody. You spent a lot of time around that program. Who should we expect to sit outside of the obvious when it comes to like Travis Kelce, Patrick Mahomes, maybe a Chris Jones? Or are there really going to be that many notable names outside of maybe that big three? Or are we just looking at, I mean, those are big three, but
yeah, there's going to be probably some other ones. I would assume with his age, DeAndre Hopkins, you don't see him. I would think the importance of, say, Nick Bolton as deep as they are at linebacker, that's maybe a name you don't see. Maybe in the secondary, Trent McDuffie or Justin Reed, because they're thin in the secondary. You don't want to lose anybody on this final game that doesn't, impact your season at all. Maybe somebody on that offensive line. Joe Tooney's really getting up there in age, has been asked to play guard and tackle this year. That could be a name. Creed Humphrey as well at the center spot. He's one of the best centers in football. Isaiah Pacheco, put him definitely in that group. He's not going to play. But to me, you're right. If Isaiah Pacheco doesn't play, which is almost a certainty right now in my understanding, is Kareem Hunt carried them for a stretch of the season.
Still got to play Kareem Hunt. Yep.
Is he a terrible running back? I mean, he had a stretch where he was carrying this. He was a big part of carrying this offense when they couldn't do anything. And so you're still going to see him. You're still most likely going to see Xavier Worthy as a rookie. You're going to. They haven't made a decision, I'm told, but I would think it's probably leaning closer to Hollywood Brown playing than not playing. They need him to get snaps. He's been out for so long. They want him to get some snaps. Those are two pretty good receivers. Noah Gray has been outstanding for them as a tight end. I would say Noah Gray's not going to rest in this game. Again, you don't have enough guys, so you're still going to play good players. And here's the other part. It's a good scheme with a really good coaching staff. The coaches still coach.
Yep.
Right? And they still put together the game plan. They don't take a break. And so, there is no layup in the NFL. No. Really, ever. And so,
James, I'm old enough to remember in 2019 when the Joe Flacco-led Broncos took on the Chiefs in a primetime game, and Mahomes hurts his ankle on like the first or second drive of the game, and everyone around town is thinking this is how they're going to end the streak. When at that point it was only half as long as it ended up growing to be, and Matt Moore torched the Broncos from the backup cornerback spot, and I think the final score was like 30-6. So that alone, all of those things that you said, I think are absolutely true. The coaches still coach. It's still a great scheme. They're an organization with a entrenched culture of winning, and they've been in these positions before. And those backup players, those reserve players that are going to see more time, if not some of the first times in a long time, they still play with pride. They've got contracts to try to secure. They've got careers to try to hold on to. So it's not like there's no rolling over.
No, look, I mentioned Carson Wentz. What do you think Carson's playing for? This is his opportunity this year
to be Sam
to show
Darnold.
31 other teams that I want another go. I want another shot. Like, he's going to come out more motivated than ever to try to go out there, specifically show everybody, if I land with a coach like Andy Reid, who Andy honestly thinks the world of Carson, in all honesty, and look at what it's made me, I think it's a difficult spot to be in because of the perception. And that's what I hope you and I, Richie, right now are trying to clear up a little bit heading into this game.
I mean, did we not just watch Drew Lock play like the ultimate hero ball game of his life and essentially cost the New York Giants a realistic shot at the number 1 pick or even a top 3 pick to a certain degree?
And the Colts had everything to play for in that game.
Yep.
Everything to play for to keep their playoff hopes alive. So,
I think this is a do or die situation for the Broncos, and it sounds like you maybe lean a little bit more toward that line of this team. This is a team that has to make the postseason, or you have to have genuine conversations about, did they fail their ultimate, at the end of the day, their ultimate goal of the season? I know that it's different in week 18 than it was at week 2, but the way that the board played out for this team to have 9 wins with 3 to play and just need 1 to secure their first postseason berth since the Super Bowl run and then miss it is going to be painful if that's what we end up having to talk about on Monday morning.
Yeah, that's called a collapse. You can't shake that in any other direction. You should have put more points on Cincinnati in the first half. certainly against a defense that has struggled. Would they put up 3 in the first half? We saw some plays and some explosive plays in the second half for sure. I like that there was no quit. But really, Zach Taylor handed you the game at the end of regulation.
Yep.
So you've had opportunities. You couldn't put a whole game of football together yet over these last couple of games, and you need to do that in Week 18. Do they have the ability to do that? For sure.
Yeah.
They definitely do. The defense was, honestly, it's so wild. Like, Richie, what's your opinion? I want to first, like, of going against Joe Burrow in that group. Do you think the defense played well?
I think that any defense tasked with playing Joe Burrow in general, let alone Joe Burrow when he's having a career MVP type season, despite what their team record is a tall task. So
yeah,
I think that I would categorize them as they bent but didn't break in a lot of situations.
Good way to put it.
Conceding that you're going to give up points to an offense like that. I also think that Riley Moss coming back and his first assignment back is to rotate between Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and mix in a little Mike Gesicki and Yoshivas. And I mean, it's not like they have slappies running routes out there on each side of him. So I think that it was a bend but don't break, good but not great. But they had great moments. They turned the ball over halfway through the fourth quarter in a tied game at 17-17 and gave the offense a chance to completely change the momentum, and Bo Nix threw a pick on the ensuing possession. They got to overtime and lost the toss and got the stop. They did what they were asked to do, and both sides were not complimentary of each other in the timing when they needed it.
That's exactly right. So my point was going to be this. You gave up a boatload of yards to the guy who should be the MVP of the league if this team had more wins. You have maybe the most talented group of 3 pass catchers in football between Gesicki and Jamar Chase, who's going to win the Triple Crown, and T. Higgins. You hit Joe Burrow 15 times.
7 sacks.
7 times. And you came up with very opportunistic moments where you stopped Joe Burrow. And you didn't compliment that against a really bad defense.
Yeah, I think if I was to pick an area of the like splice it a little deeper, an area within the defense that I think did not perform well, it was the linebacking crew. I think your front 4 got serious pressure as good as they could have in certain aspects. I think your secondary, when again tasked with guarding a potential Triple Crown winner in Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, who I think is a wide receiver 1 on many teams. And then guys like Yoshivas, Gesicki. I just think that we saw the familiar pain of like not being able to cover tight ends, and then Cincinnati clearly exploiting that, where it was anything that was first, second, third, whatever it was, as long as it was within 5 yards, there was an in-breaking route by Gesicki there. I mean, it felt like he had like 9 receptions at halftime.
Yeah, I felt like I kept seeing this over and over again.
Yeah.
In the entire game, because that was what Gesicki did after every catch. Yeah, it's and listen, like depth is affected when your salary cap is affected. And so when you lose a player like Alex Singleton, like you can mask it against certain schemes and against certain teams. You can get exploited massively by certain teams with certain schemes and with certain players running the show. And so that happens. And I don't know what else to say about last week other than the defense did give them enough opportunities to win the game.
I agree.
As an offense.
Before we take a little trip around some of the other games in the NFL, I want to get your succinct thought on Sean Payton's decision not to go for 2, to kick the extra point and go into overtime. What did you think about it in that moment? Was that the right call, regardless of hindsight? Did you think that the momentum and everything had said, hey, we should go for 2 here, or was kicking the extra point and trusting the defense the way you did the right move?
I'd go for 2. I'd go for 2 7 days a week and twice on Sunday. How many ties? I don't think you put, first off, I don't think you put the fact that if you end in a tie, you get into the postseason into your thinking. How many ties have happened this season?
None. Zero, yeah.
0 in the entire league. And there's been a number of overtime games. So
I agree.
I would take that out of my thinking immediately, that if we tie, we get into the postseason. Ties just haven't happened. They don't happen very often at all. You have to go through a whole nother quarter against, again, the potential MVP of the league with an explosive offense against your defense, who, as we said, has hit Burrow. He has come back time and time again, but they have also given up like 500 yards. So they're exhausted. 17-play drive, 11, 12-play drives. Like, this defense was on the field, and some of those drives happened where the offense came back on and was on for 3 plays, and the defense was right back on the field. I'm not I mean, I would say valiant effort, defense. Thanks for a couple of 4th down stops. Thanks for a couple of red zone stops. I appreciate it. I can't count on you guys to do that again in the overtime frame. And we have the opportunity to go out here and win the game with another game in hand and end it right now. I would say that's what you go and do. And then when you go back and you look through it, did they have a gotta have it 2 yards to go type of situation in the game, Richie? No, they didn't. Which, to my belief, would be your 2-point play, your go-to 2-point play, your can't miss 2-point play is still there on the sheet. You haven't used it yet. So my assumption would be that play was still sitting there because you weren't in like a 2nd or 3rd and goal from the 2. And oftentimes that's when you use your 2-point play because it gets you a touchdown. You're not going to save it for that. So my thought would be that play was still available. And I don't think Bo Nix sits there and puts 2 fingers up when the play is over and the touchdown happens on his own. That is oftentimes, almost to a certainty, told to the quarterback before the drive starts. If we score, we're going for 2. So I believe something in their thinking, if you put all of that together, it changed to kick it and go for 1.
Interesting, because I had thought when I saw Bo put up the 2 fingers, I had thought, well, okay, find me a quarterback.
Wants to go for 2.
Yeah, find me a quarterback that scores a game-tying touchdown that's going to be like, you know what, bring the kicker out. Hang on, I'm good.
Now, I will say that this is watching that and covering the NFL forever. Usually, what I just said means you were told before the if you run off the field without holding 2 fingers up, you were told you're going for 1 after the. How many times see Peyton Manning kind of just like they score a touchdown, fist pump, trot right to the sideline? Because you're usually told before the drive what's going to happen in this instance if we score with time, if we score at the end. So I would have gone for it. The part that is just making me kind of curious is we were on here talking about Sean Payton's aggression against the Chargers leading into halftime. And I've gone on the fan, I think, with Zach and Phil and with Stoke and Mike and said, this is the coach you have. This is the way Sean Payton's wired. He's aggressive. He's always going to be aggressive. This is the way he coaches. Like it or not, that's who Sean Payton is as a coach. So put that in there as well, Richie. It's almost going, well, this is opposite of what we usually see Sean Payton do in these situations, which makes you scratch your head even a little bit further about why they didn't go for 2.
Yeah, and I think it's one of those things too, where I think there's an element of damned if you do, damned if you don't. If he had kicked the extra point, they get the stop, they go down and kick a field goal and win the game. Everyone's like, oh, hey, it's not a big deal. It's not as big of a controversy. If they go for 2 and they miss it, there's a lot of hindsight of your offense was clicking. You had kind of picked up some momentum toward the end of the game. You just needed to get 1 stop, blah, blah, blah. Or maybe you would have won the toss. I don't know. So
do you think that first, I don't really believe all that much in momentum, but do you think the offense was really clicking in the second half, or were there 2 massive plays?
No, I think there were 2 massive plays to Marvin Mims. By and large, I actually think Bo Nix was a little erratic. And I think he was a little we saw some happy feet uncomfortability with a lot of his throws, other than the 2 beautifully thrown balls. The deep ball to Marvin Mims that went 67 yards in the air, that might be the best throw that a quarterback in a Broncos jersey has thrown in almost a decade. And the 4th down throw, the game tying touchdown to Marvin Mims, when it happened in real time, I thought, oh my gosh, he just has to huck and heave a prayer out there because he's getting chased down the sideline. But when you watched it happen in slow motion, and you watch the replay, he puts that ball exactly where it needed to be. It was a good throw. So it was a prayer that was answered, but it wasn't just like a Hail Mary as it kind of initially looked.
And I would say this in a positive light towards Bo. I haven't seen in any of these instances where it's come down to gotta have it moments that the moment is too big for him and his eyes are too wide and the lights are too bright and he panics. I think the amount of football that he played at the collegiate level is showing. I think you saw it in Jaden Daniels on Sunday night, the amount of college football that he's played. He had this same vibe in the game against Atlanta. Like, these guys are coming in, I think, with a lot to like heading into their second season, heading into hopefully the postseason for both teams. to where they're not going to feel like it's too big for him. I don't think Bo at all feels like any of these things are too big for him. Do mistakes happen? For sure.
Yeah.
Does the offense have some issues, with air yards downfield and having difficult getting vertical and having difficult, mixing it up on defenses to where they don't get too predictable? Of course. But I would say Bo Nix's demeanor, I think, is a real positive in the way that this game, even though they lost, kind of finished out.
James, we have an opportunity this year, a unique opportunity, I think, to witness a genuine pursuit of greatness when it comes to Saquon Barkley chasing down Eric Dickerson's single season rushing record. He's 101 yards short of doing it. And the Eagles are now faced with that precarious decision of, do they take a quote unquote or a calculated risk to allow their star player to chase something that he likely will never be in position to do again? Or do they do what's best for the team and sit people and rest up and get ready for a postseason run to try to win a Super Bowl, knowing that the game has no impact on their standing? Where do you fall? Which side of the aisle do you fall on when it comes to that debate?
It's an impossible debate. It's almost like the damned if you do, damned if you don't type of debate. If Saquon goes down, everybody is going to roast Nick Sirianni.
Against his former team.
But against his former team that's giving up over 142 rushing yards a game. Only one team, I believe, is worse than they are in terms of rush defense. I would leave it up to Saquon. If I'm Nick Sirianni, and he has done this season, remember, in the first game against the Giants, he went up to Saquon and said, do you want the single-game rushing record, or do you want to go? And what did Saquon? Let the other guys eat.
Let the young guys eat.
I would say Saquon's unselfishness during the course of this season, because he is that way with Kenny Gainwell a lot in their backfield. I know the running back coach really, really well. I actually played at Air Force Academy out here, Jamal Singleton. He is oftentimes what's best for the team, go. But I would put Saquon in that offensive line, because I do not think this is a rushing record for one player. I really think the offensive line takes a lot of pride in that. And this is an Eagles group up front that all those guys could hang their hat on this. Jeff Stoutland, one of the best offensive line coaches in the history of this league, could hang his hat on this. I would put the O-line and Saquon in a room together and say, what do you guys want to do? Maybe they come to the conclusion, I have heard this, like he plays a half. And if you don't get it in the first half, you're out. But I think if you play a half, you might as well play the game.
I agree.
And so the Eagles are a legitimate Super Bowl contender, for sure. They're one of the three best teams, I'd say, in the NFC. And so if they weren't that, I think this was a no-brainer that you play him. But since they're a legit Super Bowl contender, oh, man, I don't know. I'm going back and forth, because here's the thing. Do you know the single passing season record?
It was Drew Brees. No,
right
was
there.
it?
Okay.
Yeah,
All right. That's it. Do you know who holds the all-time rushing record?
Yeah.
Eric Dickerson. Do you know the number? Yes. We all know it. It's like one of the marquee records in NFL history. So when you have a chance at it, to protect his safety in Philadelphia, my hometown, I would say Nick Sirianni should leave it up to the O-line and Saquon.
I'm glad that you referenced it that way too, because I was listening to Terrell Davis and Mark Schlereth talk about this on Monday, and Mark illustrated it the exact same way that you did, which was, it's not just a running back award. It is a team award. And Mark, when TD was rushing to get his 2,000 yards, Mark said all the guys in the room were like, we want to go get this for TD. We want to go. We
want 2,000, right?
Yes. Yeah. We want to go push these guys down so that we can get this, not he can get this. And I think that I think it makes sense to rest guys and to do things. And obviously the ultimate goal of every season when you go into the year is to win the Super Bowl. They don't go, you're not sitting in a meeting room in the preseason being like, okay, we're going to beat Eric Dickerson, you know? Yeah. So I get that, but I just think that the amount of circumstances that have to fall into place and the things that have to be done in order to be in pursuit of a single season record like the rushing record, which is harder to break, in my opinion, especially in a pass happy league now, than the single season passing record. I just feel like if I were in the position of Nick Sirianni, I think ultimately leaving it up to him and the offensive line, I think would do it. I think in my heart, I would feel like I was robbing someone of a once in a lifetime opportunity by not allowing them to do it. So I hope
You like my idea then? You
they
like
get
that pick?
Yes, absolutely. And I agree with you too, because I heard the thing about giving him a half. If you're going to give him a half, just play the whole game. Because if he needs 101 yards and he gets 75 in the first half, are you going to let him sit 26 yards short, when he could clearly get it in the second half? All that. So,
I do want to make this real quick point. Everybody says he's getting an extra game.
Yes.
Look at how fewer his carries are.
Correct.
Than Eric Dickerson.
And I heard
by a ton.
Yeah, I think he's like 40 carries
40
short.
carries
yeah.
short of him. Yeah.
And here's what I'll say about the people who say he got an extra game. We let those geezers in Miami pop champagne for the undefeated season every year when they played a 14-game season. When we've already seen Brady go 16-0.
He did.
And all that stuff. So, O.J. Simpson set the rushing record in 14 games or maybe even less. Mm-hmm. He was the first running back to reach 2,000 yards in that short of a span, and Eric Dickerson is still recognized as the champion, even though OJ did it in less games. Pretty soon, we're within a handful of years away of the NFL maybe getting to 18 games.
We are.
Okay, and so yeah, all of these things are going to continue to expand. The point is that it's still just as difficult in a lot of ways to reach the benchmark, even with the expansion of games, because of what you alluded to. There's fewer carries to go around. Mm-hmm. So I don't buy into that at all. I said the same thing when Cooper Kupp was in pursuit of the single season receiving record, and Adrian Peterson when he had his rushing campaign. I don't buy into that. I think it's dismissive to what the guys are doing right now.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
You want to do a little?
I'm looking at this chat. I don't know. Does anybody want to ask anything, Richie? I'm always curious.
Yeah, here, Trey's got the control of the ones and twos back there. If anybody's got a question for James Palmer, well, we got a few minutes here left. Throw it up, throw it in the chat. Let's get it going. And while we're waiting for some questions to brew here, James, what did you make of the discourse about last night's game where Dan Campbell had the opportunity to potentially sit his starters and rest guys in a game that wasn't going to impact his standing like it will this coming week when they take on Minnesota, and choosing to do that? Do you fall in the same line kind of with Saquon and the rushing record and going for it with the Lions situation as you did with the Eagles?
Rest versus rust is an age-old debate, right? Forever. And Andy Reid's on the precipice, as we're talking about the Broncos game, of Patrick Mahomes not playing for 23 days. Like, it's a long time.
Yeah.
But they're comfortable with it, and that's the way Andy coaches it, and the way Andy coaches practice, and the way they operate in Kansas City. It's their norm. It's their identity. It's how they work. It's how they operate. I think Dan Campbell would be doing his group a disservice if he did something the opposite of the way he coaches and the message he preaches around the calendar. Mm-hmm. So if this is the way Dan Campbell is wired, yes, we all know is that we're going to go 100 miles an hour all the time, and we're going to play anybody, anywhere, and we're going to play physical football every day. Like, how do you tell your players that all season long, and then when week 18 rolls around, you're going to go, guys, I'm going to give you guys a breather? You just can't. You got to be consistent with your message if that's the message that you're going to go with. Andy has a different message about how he manages his team throughout the season, and how he manages them throughout campus differently. So, like, I don't have a problem with it because it's remaining consistent. My biggest thing with coaches is that if you ask any players around the league, and I talk to everybody around the league and cover this entire league, players just want to know where they stand all the time. And they want to know where things go with the coach all the time. One of the biggest issues with Daniel Hackett when he was in Denver, players are walking in the building and they'd see, oh, the schedule's different than it was yesterday. Oh, this is now here. This is now here. Oh, it's the worst thing you can do to players. They hate it. So I want to know the way we do things, and that's the way Dan Campbell does it. Whether that group looked a little tired out there, which they might have on defense, I would say I'm completely fine with it because Dan Campbell is telling his players, this is what I've always told you. I'm not steering away from it, and neither should you.
Fair enough. I agree with you. I think that, the NFL has a 100% injury rate, and injuries can happen anytime, anywhere. And I think that sometimes you can I think when conventional wisdom approaches it, in terms of rest and things like that, it makes sense. But at the end of the day, I think sometimes you can bend yourself backwards in mental gymnastics trying to avoid things, and then it has longer term ramifications into the postseason because you threw yourself out of rhythm. Looks like the first question we're getting is a predictable one, James, from Kale. How How much product do you use in your hair? Are you a pomade guy? Are you a mousse guy?
No, pomade. A little bit of this Rizul in here.
Hey, I use that stuff too. Oh my gosh.
Okay, boom.
I
Wow,
feel
you're very giddy about that.
I
Richie.
feel so much
but we throw
better.
a little bit in there. We don't really overdo it. But the hair's trained to be exactly the way it's supposed to be.
I love it.
Oh, the next question is the one that everyone asks. Always.
Why does Sean stop the run game?
I mean, and I say this all the time, and people probably get upset with me about it, but like, you could go back and look at a lot of play callers that are some of the best in this league, and some of the best this league's ever seen, and the most creative this league's ever seen, and they have an issue with sticking with the run. And it always goes back to when I have conversations with older guys, and they look back at like a Gary Kubiak coach team. Maybe, nothing against Gary, I think he's pretty sexy, but least sexiest teams you can imagine are ones that just pound the football. And what usually happens is, if you run the football consistently, I'm not saying this is Sean's thing, but like if you run the ball consistently and it doesn't work, man, you look bad. If you throw the football and you're not completing balls and you lose, it doesn't look as bad in a lot of owners' minds. There is a hard thought process to sticking with the run, whether it's going or not. You can win a lot of games that way, but it's hard oftentimes to get a job if you run the football that way in a lot of NFL people's minds. Like, there's just, you have to have a lot of security in what you do and a lot of steadfast ability to stick with it, and it's hard. It's Andy Reid, one of the best coaches we've seen in this league, and it's going to be here in Denver next week, is in all of Philly, he struggled with running the football. He never would run it, and everybody would lose their minds on it. They have Brian Westbrook, great back. Like, it's very hard to stick with, and it takes a lot to stick with the run. Specifically in the passing league, specifically with the way the game is designed for multiple options for the quarterback. So I don't know why. Jaleel McLaughlin, I thought, was running the football pretty well against Cincinnati. I thought he was doing enough work to get some more carries. They also were limited with the amount of plays Cincinnati was running. That impacts you as well. But there's a million different ways to slice it. They just need to find a way to be better with it, in all honesty. And they've tried to find different things to do to be a better run team.
Yeah, and to your point, I mean, Jaleel McLaughlin, I think he had 10 carries for 69 yards. He was averaging almost 7 yards a clip, and it wasn't. And then you just move away from it. And there's only so many times you can circle in Sharpie on your play sheet to run it, or you can try to get creative and use Marvin Mims and do this and do that. But at the end of the day, I think it ultimately falls back closer to kind of the Pittsburgh Steelers philosophy that we've talked about, was we're just going to do it. Even if it's not working at the level we want it to consistently, we're just going to stick at it. And that's how you end up being, what was the stat you gave? They were top 5 in attempts and bottom 5 in yards per carry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Pittsburgh, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that is a coach that's very confident in this is our formula. And I don't care what we do, we're going to run it. And there is a hard thing to sell oftentimes to fans. I hate to say this, is like a first half can look terrible sticking with the run. And everybody on the planet is like, all right, we got to air. The run's not working. The run game is a cumulative thing through 60 minutes. You wear a team out in the first half if you stick with it. You start to get guys, and I've talked to plenty of players about this. There are definitely decisions being made by guys on the defensive side of the ball when you start seeing them get worn out. And so it is such a slow, methodical pace you have to by the fourth quarter, that run that wasn't working now pops for 5 a carry if you stick with it through the duration of the game. I have to say, this is an offensive line that was paid to be run graders. Like, that was the strength of most of these guys on this offensive line. But sticking with it is hard. It is. And I think there is a bit of an infatuation Sean has with Bo. And what he wants Bo to accomplish and achieve and grow in this first year. And maybe that plays a part in it as well.
Well, I agree with you. I think that they, regardless of how you do it, whether it's scheme and philosophy be damned, and we just have to stick to what we think is a winning formula in terms of an amount of carries that we have to reach, or you find better ways to get more creative. And I don't know how much more tinkering you can do with the players that you have. But I think that if they are going to make it into the postseason, which again, 3 or 4 weeks ago, I would have told you once they get into the postseason, but now we are at a point where it's literally if, in the most literal sense. So if they get into the postseason, and if they're going to have to figure that out. in the run game. So, James, I think this is a good one to close it out here on. How are you feeling about Broncos and Chiefs? Do you feel confident based on what you've seen or not? You are intimately involved with both franchises, and I think no one can speak to this better than you.
Yeah, I think Denver's going to win the game. I do think that's going to end up happening. And I think actually, and as this conversation has progressed, Richie, I'm almost like, maybe this is a great spot for the long-term growth of the Denver Broncos and for Sean and a young team. It makes me terrified heading into this game because you have a rookie quarterback, you have a youthful team that has blown 2 opportunities again in the postseason. Now their backs against the wall. How does this week of practice go? And you go and close it out. I don't care. You can sell it this way if you're Sean Payton against the back-to-back Super Bowl champs. You beat them and you got into the postseason. You can spin this if they play great, that your team responded to adversity and the idea of a collapse is gone. I still think it's not going to be very easy. I think some people think this is a layup. I don't think that's the case. So I do think Denver wins. And I think it's going to be on the heels of that defensive line is going to have to go out and play great again. And that group's been awesome. Zach Allen, by the way, last week was incredible. Like, that dude is
I'm with you. I think the Broncos ultimately will quell all of our fears. They will make the postseason, even though it was a little bit uglier than we intended. And then from there, you just see how the dice fall. James, as it has been every Tuesday so far this season, it was a pleasure chatting with you, and I can't wait to catch up again in the new year.
It's going to be great, buddy. I see Russell Wilson. He's probably going to be back in Pittsburgh. Okay. I saw that on there. I just want to answer it.
Awesome. Have a great rest of your day, James. To all of you listeners out there, thank you so much for joining us, and we will catch up with you again in 2025.